Welcome to the KidMin podcast with Dr. Val and Dr. Virginia, where we talk about everything KidMin
and pull back the curtain on some of the surprises and challenges in children's ministry that nobody prepares you for.
I'm Dr. Val, and together we have over 45 years of experience in children's ministry.
I'm Dr. Virginia. Valerie and I met over 10 years ago in our doctoral program at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. We are excited to share with you all the great stuff that we have picked up over the years. We want to minister to you, the children's minister.
Welcome, friends. Thank you so much for joining us today. Dr. Virginia and I are so excited to actually be together and talking.
Yeah.
It has been a crazy few weeks for both of us between ministry and life and the flu and a billion other things that's been going on. We have been a little in and out more than we like to be just because life. It's just been life lately. So we are super excited to be together today, and we have a great conversation with a very good friend.
Yes. So we've got David Reneau back on the podcast. He's been with us once before. Going to be talking with him again today about just some practical strategies for classroom management and proactive strategies for classroom management. I feel like I've seen just kind of a lot about that recently. A lot of questions, a lot of just struggles people are having. Just kind of popping up recently, just particularly on social media, and just sort of people asking questions about how to deal with certain situations and how to approach certain situations. And so we just wanted to have a conversation just kind of about classroom management, just with some ideas and strategies.
Great. Well, let's bring David in. Hello.
Hey, thank you so much for bringing me back. It is always a great time to talk to the doctors. And one of these things is the classroom management. I see these questions all the time, and I actually have a post on my blog about the discipline plan that works, and that is like one of my top hit blog posts. Not blog posts, like I don't know, it's like 5-6 years, and it's in the top 10 or top 5 every year. So this is a big topic. I'm glad we're here to talk about it.
It is. Well, it's just evergreen. Yeah,
it is. Well, it's one of those things that every situation is a little bit different. Every ministry is a little bit different. Every classroom you walk into. And so it's just a completely one of those ever evolving situations that you run into of how do I manage this classroom and manage it effectively? And then also in the church setting, we work with so many wonderful volunteers that don't have an educational background. So they are not used to classroom management issues. And so it's just something that I think as children's ministers, we're always struggling with.
Yeah, I see that. I see the question, and it's really a lot of those that come from a non-education background, because I'm a certified teacher. I'm bivocational now, where I'm an executive pastor in my church, but I teach high school. But part of that teacher education was going through several classroom management classes, so I was able to take that information and immediately put it into and translated that into the children's ministry. It's not the same way as it is in a classroom, because you do only see these kids once a week, or sometimes once a week, ideally. So
But
it's still important. I have still found myself, that's one of the biggest things I'm training a new KidMin volunteer in, is classroom management and how to spot things, and how to, this is the appropriate way to deal with this, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you make just sort of a very practical point that we get our kids at best once a week. And I think I've seen the statistics where it's like average church attendance is down to 1.8 times a month.
Right.
And so, we're doing good if we get them once a month.
Right.
And so just that we feel like it's obvious, or we're always talking about our expectations, or we're always talking about this. But whenever you've got a kid who's coming maybe twice every 6 weeks, that's a lot different. What they are experiencing is a lot different than what we are experiencing. And I feel like that's so important to remember when it comes to our expectations and communicating them and being clear with kids.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just that can be so different.
we're coming into Easter. So like
Mhm.
you are going to see more guest kids come. You have those,
Mhm.
I call them CEOs, the Christmas and
Right.
Easter onlys.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah.
those
Right.
kids come in.
Right.
And so like one of the things they teach in classroom management classes is they say that first week of school is so important because that's really where
Mhm.
you're teaching expectations and here's all the
Right.
rules and
Mhm.
here's how we function in those things. When I translated that over to children's ministry, I was like, that means I have to do that every single week
Right.
Yeah.
because I am going to have different kids
Mhm.
every single week. And so I
Mhm.
have rules that I go over every single week. And I had
Mhm.
to get creative with how I'm going to do it and present it
Mhm.
and present those rules and expectations that I want the kids to do. But even though like my regular kids, I had built a culture of like, this is what you do at these certain times, which is why you go over these rules, is to build that culture of behavior.
Right.
You still
Mhm.
I still had to reinforce that culture every
Mhm.
single week. And there were some times where I would like
Yes. Amen.
I would take a month off, and then some of my volunteers, the ones that were there every week, and it's like, we're kind of what's happening, and it's like what behavior was falling apart, the culture
Right.
was falling apart, and it's like, okay,
Mhm.
we got to go back and we got to start doing the rules
Yeah.
again. So
Yes.
Right.
let's do
Yeah.
that. I mean,
Right.
and it only took like 4 weeks before things started falling apart again. We got to
Oh,
Yes.
reestablish
yes. Yeah.
what's fair.
Yes.
Right. Right.
Yes. Yes. It does. It happens fast. And it's funny
Mhm.
because I'm kind of in the middle of a role transition.
Mm,
And one of the things with that, so I'm transitioning from like preschool into like into kids ministry, basically.
mhm,
Um, and one of the things in that transition, like I've spent the past, 2.5 years sort of like conditioning the kids to like certain things, like certain
mhm,
call and response, certain attention getters.
Right.
mhm.
And I had a volunteer kind of remark to me like, "Oh, you're so good at that. The kids respond so well to you." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's because I spent 2.5 years training them on what to do.
Right.
Mhm.
Whenever I say clap once if you're listening, whenever I say catch a bubble,
Right, right.
and so that's why these things work so well and why they work better than saying, "Hey, settle down,"
Mhm.
Yeah.
because they know what to do because just like what you're saying, that culture has
Mhm.
Mhm,
been repeated like every single week
Right.
over and over and over,
mhm.
and they've been just kind of taught what to do and taught how to respond and taught what's expected.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and one of the you're making progress when you got a new kid or a newer kid who's like keeps talking, and then like the other kids are like, "Shh, we don't do that right now." That
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
hey,
Yeah.
then it's like, okay,
Yeah.
all right, we're making progress, yay!
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Well, and that's what's so great is when you have your regular attenders that are there and that they are following, then the newer kids are like looking around going, "Oh, wait, this is what I'm supposed to do." So it's
Mhm,
that so it even though things do change each week and your kids change each week, you have those built-in things that not only do your volunteers become very comfortable with, but the kids that do come each week are comfortable with, and that encourages the others to follow suit. So,
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the beauty of having that culture of because when
Mhm.
everyone, unless you're dealing with preschoolers, don't really pick up on this. But as the kids get older and as we all get older, whenever we walk into a place, we are looking for the
Mhm,
rules of
Right.
that
mhm.
place. There's a
Yes.
reason why when we walk into a quiet room, we whisper
Mhm.
Mhm,
because everyone else
mhm.
is quiet. And you walk into a loud, boisterous room, you're gonna yell because
Mhm.
that's what people are doing. And
Right.
if you go to a church outside of your tradition, like I come from a Pentecostal background, so like I went to one time I went to a Catholic funeral and
Mm.
they were standing up and sitting down and I was totally off balance, but I was
Mhm.
trying to
Trying to follow
match.
along.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, we're
Yeah.
sitting. Oh, we're standing. It's like, oh, is this a footstool? No, that's a kneel stool. Okay.
Right.
All right. So, it's like what, and just trying to figure out those things. And so
Yeah.
our kids are doing that when they come into our kids'
Mhm.
church too. They
Mhm.
are, they may not be as sophisticated as an adult trying to figure that out, but they are
Right.
looking for, okay, where do I sit? When can I get up? How do we go to the bathroom?
Mhm.
When do
Mhm.
we get to play? What am
Mm.
I supposed to do? And so it's helpful at the beginning of the service to convey this is what this is what is expected. This is how we want you to behave.
Right.
And it's funny. I have a funny story too about that. Very recently, my husband and I were over in New Orleans because he's in school. He's anyway taking classes, and we were over there. And we were eating downtown, and I was like, "Oh, let's get on one of the streetcars and let's ride on a streetcar because it's this New Orleans thing, this New Orleans experience." We get on; it's super crowded, and you can tell it's a mixture of like tourists who are like wide-eyed with their cameras out, and like just regular people who just live in the city. And I'm looking around, and it's super busy, and so we have to stand up. And I'm looking around, I'm like, "Oh no, I don't know like trolley etiquette." Like what is the streetcar etiquette right now? Like, are we supposed to whisper? Can we talk in a normal volume? How does this work? Like, what should we be doing? Am I in this lady's space? And so it's so funny because I was looking around feeling that way, being like, oh gosh, like I don't know what the etiquette is around this because we're just these random tourists just hopping on. So oh gosh.
Some of the most awkward places are where you look up and you realize, oh, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And so we it's important that we set those things and try to find out those things. And Dr. Virginia, you were talking about I was talking about for preschoolers, but that's also true for neurodivergent kids and traumatized kids. They also can't pick up on the cues as well as other kids.
Right.
And so we do them a favor. We do all of our kids a favor and ourselves a favor by making our expectations clear weekly. Because I think about those neurodivergent kids, and I think about, those kids who come in sometimes with really big behaviors or just don't have the advantage of having good home training, as one of our professors would say, just having good home training about how to behave in public. And so we level the playing field by making our expectations clear, week after week. That way all the kids know what they need to do to be, successful. Because in general, like kids want to, they want to please adults. They want to fit in with their peers. Like they want to do what they're supposed to do or what they feel like they're supposed to do. And so by making that clear, we were kind of leveling that playing field for everybody right from the outset. So
well, and we were talking earlier, the fact that kids do thrive with structure because they do need to know what's coming next, what's expected of me. It helps them to process better. And like you said, I think that so many times leaders assume that children are trying to cause an issue without thinking about the possibility that maybe they are homeschooled kids that have never been in a classroom situation before. And this is the first time they've ever visited church, or maybe they are neurodivergent and they just don't process social skills and those things that we naturally know to do. Like you said earlier about if you come into a classroom where everyone is whispering, we naturally whisper, but they may not know that that's what is accepted to do. So we need to not as leaders assume that kids are trying to cause a problem, but really think about how can we help them to be able to process the situation and the environment better.
Yeah, because there's sometimes where kids they really don't know what they did wrong. They're getting even if you do go over the rules, they still don't know what they did wrong. And so one of the things I like to do is I like to have whenever I'm disciplining a child, especially if it's to the point, like I have several consequences for breaking my rules. So the first one's a warning. The second one is I move you away from your friend because I'm just trying to remove the distraction. The third one is, okay, now I'm going to move you away from everyone and I'm going to talk to your parents about this. And then the fourth one is we're removing you from service. Thankfully in my career, I've only had to remove a kid from service like twice. So usually your parents are told is enough. But usually if I'm having to move a kid away from their friend or even away from everyone else, then I'm going to have this conversation with them. And one of the things I'm going to ask them is, can you tell me why you were moved over here? And I want them to use their words. And I'm going to be quiet. And I'm not going to give them that because so many times we're going to say, you were doing this. And the kids is just going to parrot back what it is, just so they can
Mhm.
get out the conversation. And so it's like, no, I want you to tell me what happened. And then if they honestly don't know, then I was like, okay, you were doing this. This is the rule that you broke. This is the consequence that you are experiencing right now. Okay. Right now, that what are we going to do in the future, and allow them to express that, because if they're saying it back to you and you're not feeding them, they're just saying it back to you, then they're going to be far more likely to respond and to actually know that they understand what's happening and why this is in trouble, and so that they can you can expect it to happen. And so I even end that conversation with, can I count on you? I use those words. Can I count on you to not talk to your friend while I'm doing the lesson? Can I count on you to not get up and run across the room while we're doing, small group time? And it was like, yes, okay, all right, awesome, let's do that. And then a lot of times, like, okay, now I'm going to let you go back to your friend that I moved you before. The conversation is had, the discipline is had, even if that was for 5 minutes. It doesn't need to be for the whole service. To go back to where you were.
Well, and I like that too, because like discipline and disciple, like those are the same root word, and that is to teach. And so it's meant to like instruct, and like through this whole process that you're talking about, like by talking to the child, you are instructing them on what is a correct thing to do. And so it's like discipline is not a bad thing. Like it is a means of instruction. It is a means of teaching. And so, I think sometimes people hear discipline and think like punishment, think like punitive. And that's not necessarily what we're going for. Like we are going for instruction and teaching. That way they learn that expectation. They learn what to do. They learn, what is the appropriate thing. And so, yeah.
I think that's ultimately what we're trying to do in the first place. If you're talking about discipline and instruction, I mean, the whole point of us doing this church thing is to teach them about Jesus.
Amen.
And if your room, classroom, main auditorium, whatever you want to call it, is sheer chaos, kids are they're talking over one another, they're not paying attention, kids are getting up, moving around, then no instruction is occurring. And so we have to, that's why we set structure. That's why we set expectations. Even if you don't like the word rule, okay, that's fine. We have expectations of this is what needs to occur in order for that instruction to happen. And there are some times where we can get loud and crazy. Like if we're playing a game, be like, cheer for your team and go crazy. If we're doing a big activity where we're doing worship and you're doing big motions, go crazy on that. But also like, okay, this is altar time, and this is a time where everyone is responding to God and trying to listen to God. I don't need you doing backflips on the back row. That actually happened to me. But that is like, here's
all
what
of us.
we're doing. And so that's why we want to set those expectations and tell kids what they need to do.
Well, and what's so amazing, and I think a lot of people think when they talk about classroom rules, they expect that you're talking about a list of 20 things that the kids are, you have to go over. And it's not, because there are so many ways that you can have a basic set of classroom expectations that fall under the things that we're also teaching from God's word, and be able to incorporate. Because when we talk about being kind, that incorporates a lot of different behaviors that can happen in the classroom that you can remind them. If we talk about being respectful, that covers a lot of, so the rules don't have to be super complicated in a really long list that the kids have to memorize or anything. It can just be a few general things that we're constantly reminding the kids that we are called to be kind to our friends. So this is how we can be kind today. Are you being kind right now? Those kinds of questions.
Yeah. I think it's better to stay away from specificity as much as you can. You want to have more of that general behavior that's happening with there. So like one of my rules is stay in your seat unless you have permission to do otherwise. Okay, well then like if they're confused, they need to default to
stay in your seat.
Stay in your seat. Okay. Another one is keep hands, feet, and other objects to yourself. Okay. Like Okay, well,
Mhm.
that's what I need. I can't take off.
Mhm.
I used to serve in Florida a lot. Kids wear flip-flops. You can't take a flip-flop off and smack the kid across the head. You
Right.
can't do it.
Right.
My
Oh,
fifth
yeah.
graders love to joke about being
Mhm.
able to do that, and I was like, no, you can't.
Uh.
You can't do that. So I mean, so that was, I had 5 rules that were general
Mhm.
that went through all of the things, and
Mhm.
so then there was. I
Mhm.
still had certain rules that weren't listed on the thing, like don't run.
Mhm.
I had to do that, and don't go on the stage. Those weren't on the rules,
Mhm.
but I didn't need to
Mhm.
go over those every time. That was just more of
Right.
like, hey, get off the stage, and
Yeah.
that was usually enough
Yeah.
to, for them not to have
Mhm.
to worry about that.
Right.
Well, and I think these rules or these expectations of telling kids what to do, like stay in your seat, keep your hands and feet and objects to yourself, like
Mhm.
because one of the things that I feel like I'll see with volunteers is a kid will be up running and they'll say, "Don't run, don't run." And so they'll just start doing something different that they're also not supposed to do.
Right,
Right.
So
right.
trying to like help people get in that mindset of like, okay, don't just tell them what not to do, tell them
Mhm,
what to do.
Mhm.
Say,
mhm.
okay, come sit down on your bottom with the rest of the group. Come
Yeah.
have a seat at the table.
Mhm.
Because then there's no room for interpretation
Right.
because,
Yes.
oh, I'm not running, but I am bouncing a ball when I'm supposed to be over there in the circle learning the Bible story. Like,
Yeah.
so being like telling them what to do versus what
Mhm.
not to do,
Right.
I
Mhm.
think is like a mindset shift,
Mhm.
Yes.
oftentimes for volunteers.
Well, and,
Yeah.
again, going back to that classroom management classes, that's one of the things they always teach you to do is to redirect.
Mhm.
If you're
Mhm.
just telling them to stop, you have given
Mhm.
them no further direction. Now they're on
Right.
their own to find
Mhm.
out which direction they want to go to. And so we are going to redirect them
Right.
to. I did this in my classroom today. I teach juniors and seniors, and they were talking during the test. And it's like, hey,
Mm.
be quiet, focus on your test. So I didn't just say be quiet. I said be
Mhm.
Right,
quiet,
right.
Right.
focus on your test.
Mhm.
And so
Yes,
that's
yes.
the redirection. If
Mhm.
I got to tell 17-year-olds who are going to not be in high school in a month, you got to tell your 7-year-old. They're not going to figure it
Yes.
out.
Yeah.
Yes.
This was going to happen.
No. No. It doesn't matter what age they are. They're always testing limits. They're always
Mhm.
kind of testing to see what can I do, what can I not do, what can I get away with, what can I, that's part
Mhm.
of what they do. It's just,
Right.
you
And
know,
the more you have
Mhm.
those new kids, if you have
Mhm.
that if you have a healthy church that has a good influx of
Mhm.
kids, every week you got
Mhm.
kids testing
Right,
those boundaries. And so
right,
you need
right.
to have those boundaries clearly defined as early in that service as
Mhm.
possible. And then the other
Mhm.
thing is that you have to stick to it. So your discipline
Mhm.
plan has to be that's why I always say, like, it's not good enough to have the rules. That's why we have to have the consequences, because like
Right.
what's
Mhm.
going to happen to me,
Mhm.
because some of these kids are doing the calculus. They're
Mhm.
trying to
Mhm.
figure out, uh is it worth it?
Right.
So the first children's ministry I served in, I went in. I was a brand new kids pastor. I was still in teacher school, so I just finished some classroom management, and I sat in, and a bunch of college students had been running the children's ministry, but they didn't have any. They were just, it was like ministry tech school that were running it, so they just had a passion for kids and were just doing the best they could. And so they had the discipline policy with 3 strikes you're out, 3 strike, but the out was you don't get any candy. But for
Ugh.
every 1 strike you had, that's how many candy you. So like if you had all 3 cards,
Oh
then you got 3 pieces
gosh.
of candy. If you had 2 cards, you only got 2 pieces. And so what was happening, the kids were just
Uh-huh.
going nuts. It was like, it's worth it to me to
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
misbehave because I
Yes.
still got 2 pieces of candy. Because the
Right.
other thing is that like none of them wanted to take away the candy. And so it wasn't like first warning and then take a card. It was like warning 6 and
Right.
then take a card.
Mm.
And
Right.
so that
That
you
doesn't
gotta,
work. Yeah.
it was just chaos. And so it's
Yeah.
like, okay. And so what I did on day one is that these are the rules, these are the consequences. I still had a couple kids that I had one kid. We always have that one kid.
Mhm.
That I had that one
Mhm.
kid that never quite grasped
Right.
the thing. And as much as I love him, I was so glad when he promoted out. And just had to deal with him for a couple months. And we're like, bye. And then he came back a couple months later. Can I please come back? No, no, I'm sorry. No, you're too old. You're too old,
I would
buddy.
love it if you could, but unfortunately, you could.
Yeah, I just can't. I'm sorry.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things I talk about in classroom management conferences a lot, where I'm
Mhm.
saying you have to make sure that your consequences are practical and can be done. Because for
Mhm.
some reason, I always had a lot of volunteers that thought, well, if I scare them by saying this, then they're
Mhm.
going to do what I asked them to do. And kids
Yeah.
are not always going to do that. And sometimes they're smart enough too to know, well, you're not really going to do what you just said you're going to do. And so they're going to test it. But sometimes we get so angry, we say things like, well, I'm going to go get your mom right now. Well, how
Mhm.
hard is it going to be for you to leave your classroom to go to another Sunday school classroom, get a parent and bring it? It's not necessarily going to be something that you can do as a classroom teacher easily. But you
Right.
think
Right.
if you say that, they're just going to follow what you say. And so you want to make sure that those consequences that you have are reasonable and meet what the action was, that we're not
Yes.
going, top tier punishment or the lowest level infraction. So
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing is that we talked about, like, sometimes you have kids that are traumatized. And so if your response is to yell, to point, to belittle them because of doing that, you are triggering them,
mhm,
and
Yeah.
they are going to respond in kind.
right.
They are, and one of two, when I say in kind, that's not necessarily they're not going to do what you want them to do. They're
Right. They're
either
going to go into
going,
fight or flight.
Like,
Yeah. One way or
yeah,
another. Yeah.
yeah, they're going to go belligerent, or
Yeah.
they're going to completely shut down, and now you got
Yeah.
nothing out of them. And
Right.
so you gotta, and then again, we're talking, this is relationship. You gotta have a relationship. You gotta know your kids. And so, okay, this is when a trigger. And so what I always try to do is, like, I even if I'm flustered, I don't want to show that I'm flustered, because now they know how to push my
Yes.
buttons.
Yes.
But then I'm also be very calm and like, I have asked you, you have received your warning. I have asked you to stop talking to your friend. You have not. So now I need you to get up, and I need you to go sit in this chair. And then they're going to get up and they're going to go sit in another chair. So no, 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 no. I need you, because now they want control. I'm like, no, no, no.
Right.
I said this chair. This is the chair. And and it's like, okay. So, and then they sit. Thank you for following the expectation.
right.
You always want to be respectful, but also very firm and clear of, this is what I want you to do in this moment. And then because they're gonna find other ways to go around it. And every if you give an inch, they're gonna take a mile. So
Yep.
I'm super gracious. People call me too nice. I'm too nice. But also, like the kids also know when I put on that teacher face, they're like, oh, he's serious. All right.
Oh,
I
yeah.
gotta go.
You get that look.
Right.
You have that
Yeah.
look that
Right.
you give, that they know, if they know you well enough. Like you said, if you built that relationship, they know you care. They know you love them, but they also know that you're being very serious about that moment. And a lot of times those looks are really all you have to give once they get to know you well enough, because they're like, oh, okay, that's not normally
That's
Mr.
serious.
David's
Yeah.
look. Like that's,
Yeah.
like I know that
Yeah.
this
Like,
is,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
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 well,
Yeah.
and I always said too that my and I've kind of fallen under the same thing a lot over the years, where people have always said, well, you're being too nice, you're not tough enough, kind of thing. But one of my arguments in that is that church is different than school and home, because church is the place the kids don't have to come. And it's a place where we are modeling what Christ would do. And so it changes, I think, how we respond and how we're called to respond and how we should, because we want the kids to love to come to church. And we are not responsible to teach them things. I mean, we are responsible to teach them the word of God and how much God loves them. It's not something that we have to. I always felt like it's not that kind of level of, well, you have to learn your ABCs, or you have to learn it's the things that we are wanting to teach them, but we don't have to drop the hammer as often, and we can have more fun with it. and we
Mhm.
can let them be themselves a little bit more, and
Yeah.
we can let them not feel like there's so many restraints and so many
Mhm.
restrictions, because it's
Mhm.
okay if they write their B's and D's wrong. It's okay if they color the grass red and the sky green.
Right.
You know, we can be more
Mhm.
lenient with them in
Mhm.
a church classroom, but we still have to keep the kids safe. We still have
Mhm.
Mhm.
to make the classroom manageable so that we can teach and so that kids can
Mhm.
learn. And so I think that that's what changes our requirements as leaders in those
Mhm.
situations, in that we don't
Mhm.
have to be as harsh in this situation,
Mhm.
but we do need
Mhm.
to maintain control, and we want to
Mhm.
show love. And so there is a lot about building a relationship, because especially with those really challenging kids that you were talking about earlier, I
Mhm.
always found that the more I learned about the child, the more I learned about what they
Mhm.
enjoyed and what they
Yeah.
loved and what they like to do and their favorite toys or their favorite sports. That helped
Mhm.
me build a relationship, that helped me to be able, to impart that knowledge that they needed to know of how to behave in a classroom a little bit
Right.
easier,
Mhm.
because they trust me more, because they saw that I cared enough to ask those questions and to get to know
Mhm.
them a little bit better. And so I think it's more intricate in a church
Mhm.
setting in this way. So
Yeah. I think that's true, because there's a lot of times on the weekend, talking about the neurodivergent kids, these kids with ADHD.
mhm,
Sometimes these boys, it happens a lot. I see it a lot more in the boys than I see it in the girls. But they just can't sit still. They
Yeah.
just they're
Yeah.
just jittery. And
Yeah.
being a male in a predominantly female driven ministry, a lot of times my female volunteers didn't understand. They just wanted them to sit nice and prim and
right.
proper like my girls were
Mm.
doing. And I'd be like, you just got to let him do
Yeah.
his thing. I remember
Yeah.
this one
Yeah.
time, this kid, his ADHD was just, he had a super huge H for his, he was
Oh,
it was just
yeah. Very
he was just
Yeah.
hyperactive.
it's
Oh.
just everywhere. And so it was
Yeah.
Wednesday night, and we're supposed to be sitting and watching a video, and we'd already played outside for 30 minutes trying to get those jitters out. And I
Yeah.
could tell that he was just off.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so I pulled him aside and I said, "Hey, have you taken your medicine?" And he said,
Yeah.
"No."
Right.
Yeah.
And so we had the way our floor was set up. It was kind of like like different colored tiles. It almost looked like hopscotch. And
Mhm.
so he went off to where the other kids couldn't see him,
Mhm.
and he just played hopscotch. He just
Mhm.
Mhm.
hopped
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
tiles. And other volunteers and some even kids were like, "Why is he? How can he go do that?" And I'm like,
Right.
just let him be.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
he couldn't handle it. And
Mhm.
especially when we
Mhm.
come into summer, a lot of our kids with ADHD and
Mhm.
ADD, they come off their medicine,
Right.
Yes.
and
Yes.
so their behaviors there, and so you just gotta move them.
Right.
So
And
I
Right. Well,
yeah, go
and
ahead.
sometimes on weekends too. Like I had
Mhm.
Yes.
some
Yeah.
parents that would not
Mhm.
do meds during the weekends,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
those kids would come in on Sunday morning with a Mountain Dew in one hand and a
Oh my
donut in the
gosh.
other. You know?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
And
saw a 6-year-old walk around my church with a Red Bull, and I'm like,
oh,
Oh,
"Why did you give
no.
this kid a Red Bull? What are you doing?"
it's just not, no. And they can't
No.
control that what's going into their
Right.
bodies. I mean, that they can't control what's happening to them at that point. And
And
so it's
Yeah.
just, yeah, no.
what we need to remember too is that kids like that can either spend all their energy and attention and focus on staying still,
Mhm.
or just like what you're saying, if we give them appropriate outlets to get their movement out, then
Mhm.
they're able to listen and pay attention to the lesson.
Right.
Yeah.
Because for kids like that, sitting and staying still is taking all of their focus, and they
Mhm.
probably aren't hearing anything you're saying or anything you're trying to teach, because
Mhm.
all of their attention is on trying to meet that behavioral
Mhm.
expectation. So
Yeah.
letting them move actually enables them to pay better attention than they
Mhm.
would
Mhm.
otherwise.
Yeah.
And I've had
So,
those comments too before, like you said, from leaders or from kids that would say, I can't let that child do that because it's not fair to the other kids. The other
Mhm.
kids are around kids that struggle
mm,
enough,
Yeah.
I think, to know, okay,
Mhm.
either he can be doing this or he can be really interrupting everything we're doing. So they are going to be
Mhm.
fine with that as well. I think that
Yeah.
they understand that there are some kids that just need that little special time. And so
Yeah.
I don't think that it is as devastating um, to your behavioral plan to have these special activities for kids who need that special outlet, as long
Yeah.
as you're keeping the other kids occupied with activities that they're going to find engaging. Then they're not going to pay
Mhm.
attention to him playing hopscotch over to the side as much as you
Right.
would think. So yeah.
I have found these kids to be far more understanding than my generation ever
Mhm.
was. And it's because of this, what they call least restrictive environment, where
Mhm.
they have put all of the kids, only the most severe are
Mhm.
off in a room by themselves, that all the kids are in there. And so like my son, he's in fourth grade. And so they, in his class, they had what was called the kidney kids. And there was a table that looked like a kidney,
Mhm.
and so there was this co-teacher that had special kids, and a lot of those kids had downs or other issues, and so they were incorporated in the class with him, and so he
Right.
see these behaviors in school, so that when these behaviors from other kids were exhibited in church, they
Mhm.
already know not to point and make fun or call names, or or they may get frustrated because they're distracting from the rest of the lesson, but for the most part they understand that, like, okay, that's them. They know they're special, and so we're going to let them
Right.
do their thing while we're going to do our thing.
Right. Right.
So let's get into some like practical ideas and practical things. What are some examples or some ideas about classroom rules,
Mhm.
classroom expectations that we can use in our rooms?
Yeah. So I mentioned it before. I mentioned a couple of my rules before. I have 5 rules. The first one is follow directions the first time they're given. That
Mm,
that encompasses everything.
Mhm.
That helps to, like, get off the stage and don't run.
Mhm.
You need to
yeah,
follow directions the first time they're
yeah,
given.
yeah.
The second one is raise your hand and wait for permission to speak. They know that one because they're in school. Only your youngest
Mm,
kid are not going to know that.
mhm,
And then I say, don't speak up or interrupt when a leader is talking, because sometimes they go, ooh, 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 or then raise their hand and
mhm,
immediately shout it out. And I was like, no, that's not what I'm asking you to do. Uh,
mhm,
my third one is stay in your seat unless you have permission to do otherwise. Fourth one, we talked about this: keep hands, feet, and objects to yourself. And the last one
mhm,
is no bad language or teasing.
Mhm.
Uh,
mm,
I don't want that.
mhm,
Sometimes kids can be really mean, and
Mhm.
mhm. Yeah.
and and then like it happens in like small group where like one kid will open up and share something that's like,
Mm.
like, even as a leader,
Serious.
like, it's like, well, they'll say serious, but then
Yeah.
sometimes they'll say something that's just really odd. And
Yeah.
even as a leader, you're like, man, that's weird. And then
Mhm.
the other kids will start chuckling, and you're like,
Yeah.
No, no bad language or teasing. So,
Right.
Mhm,
Right.
so that
mhm,
that
mhm,
covers those things. So
Mhm.
mhm.
those 5 rules, I said that, like, on my first day of kids ministry, those are the 5 rules, and that I started with, and I've been using them for 16 years.
Mhm.
Even at the church I'm at now, even I'm an executive pastor, I said, hey guys, here's 5 rules you need to use for your
Yeah.
ministry. And so they've started using them, and I taught kids Wednesday night, and we went over the rules.
Right.
I didn't come up
Yeah.
with those came from a book. I think it's Harry K. Wong, The First Days of School.
Mhm.
Mm.
It's if you're a kids pastor and you're struggling with classroom management, I strongly suggest you get that
Yeah.
book. Not everything translates, but it helps. It
Mhm.
helps a lot.
Mhm,
Well, and it
mhm,
just took you a minute to go over those things. Like I mean,
Mhm.
it didn't
mhm,
take you 30 minutes. It didn't take you, it was just, very
mhm,
quickly to be able
mhm.
to run through those at the beginning of
Yeah.
each class time and just move
Mhm.
on. It's
Mhm.
just a very, yeah,
Yep.
very practical.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very keep it very simple. Yep.
I have a little video that I made with puppets, way back. Me and my friend, we shot it in one take, and then recorded it. And so I've played that, and the kids quote it because they crack jokes in it.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah. Yep,
and
yep,
so
yep.
at the end, the puppet goes, bum, 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 don't do that. And so they'll all yell out in chorus when the video's over, bum, 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 don't do that. Uh,
Yep, yep,
so
yep.
that's what he says when you'd be taken to a parent, bum, 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 don't do that. So they'll relate. So I've made a couple videos like that.
Yes.
I used to let my 5th graders make it, but theirs was always showing kids breaking the rules. And I found when I showed that video, I had more misbehavior, even though we were telling them not to,
Yeah.
because they were watching these 5th graders break all
Yes.
the rules. And I was
Mhm.
like,
Yes.
we can't do that. We gotta try something
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some of the rules? You said, what are some of the rules? I know some people like to do, they like to do more general rules. And Dr. Val, you mentioned like be kind and be
Right.
respectful.
Right.
What are those things you use?
Right. And that was usually like I had a set of maybe 5 that I,
Mhm.
like I don't over the years, obviously they changed and morphed and did different things, but usually they were like be kind, be respectful, only one person speaking at a time, when, like those kinds of things, raise your hand, ask permission, so it was just those very basic, just again, very general rules, but also just the very specific things. And sometimes over the years with different classrooms, we might need to add a rule that we didn't have in a classroom before, because
Mhm.
like you said, there might be a child
Yeah.
that has a special need that there needs to be another explanation for. So, so I feel like that it really is according to, the classroom in your group on what you really need to focus on sometimes. But I always tried to keep it really simple. And I always did that the very first day of the year. We always made a poster. The kids would help me make it. And we
Mhm.
would create those rules. And a lot of times I would ask them, even because if you ask kids like what's a rule we should have, and somebody is typically going to say one of the rules that you want to have, because they know, well, we should be nice to each other. And so, well, so number one is be kind. And I would let them make the poster. And so that's why too, when we would go over it each week, like I said, sometimes I would say it, but sometimes kids would ask me, can I go over the rules? And I'd let them go, like
Mhm.
so, it can become just a part of your classroom culture. So
Mhm.
Yeah,
Dr.
absolutely.
Virginia, what do you
Yeah,
think?
I tend to lean more into the broader ones as well, and just like what you're saying, kind of as needed, emphasizing certain expectations.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But definitely being respectful is probably my key one that has carried over no matter where I am, because
Mhm.
so much falls under that. About being respectful to your leaders, being respectful to each other, and just trying
Mhm.
to also teach kids that, like, the concept that, like, for example, like talking during the time when we're supposed to be singing worship songs, like
Mhm.
that can be disrespectful to your friend because you are preventing them from worshiping God. Like,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and I think framing it that way kind of gives kids like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Like it helps them kind of see this bigger picture of how their behavior affects others, and like
Mhm.
kind of redirects them like, this is a time to worship God.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, so I tend to be a little more general. And then as certain things pop up, emphasize specific
Mhm.
Yeah.
expectations, as needed.
Yeah.
Um,
I always did that for worship. When it was worship
mhm,
time, I would always say, you don't have to you don't have to sing,
mhm,
you don't have to dance, but
Mhm.
you have to
mhm,
stand.
mhm,
And
Mhm.
because that usually the kids, only the most stubborn of 5th graders would
mhm,
Right.
mhm,
usually once I got them standing, they would been
mhm,
loosened
mhm,
up. If you just let those kids sit, you're eh,
Mhm.
mhm,
you're playing music and you're doing your thing, and they're sitting watching you do your thing.
Mhm.
mhm, mhm,
Well, and I think I've always told leaders that the number one thing you can do for classroom management is to be prepared. If
Mhm.
you're prepared with all of
yes,
your activities, with everything that you're
yes.
going to do, along with a few extra activities just in
Mhm,
case something goes
Mhm.
quickly or something doesn't work,
mhm,
then what you're doing is you're keeping the kids engaged, and they're not allowing themselves the time, because if you give them time, they're going to find something to fill it with.
Yes.
yes.
And so the more
Yes.
prepared that you can be, and to be ready to move
Mhm,
them from one thing to the next, and to keep things moving, and to keep things short, and to think about their age, and how much attention they have. Those kinds of things can go a really long way in your classroom management.
mhm,
Because again, you're keeping them engaged, you're keeping them moving, they're not staying still too long, they're not getting bored, they're
Mhm.
able, to do that. And just little things that you can do with keeping your voice softer when they start to get loud, because then they have
Mhm.
to really lean in to listen, and those kinds
mhm,
of little things that you can do,
mhm, mhm,
so that a lot of that responsibility falls on how prepared and ready you are for your class
mhm,
time that you have with them, whether
mhm,
it's worship time or whether or not it's a Bible study time.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Well, and I think there's so many other practical things like teaching kids call and response, like, teach them whenever I say this, you say that. One of the funniest ones that I'm not going to use because I feel like I would get in trouble ultimately from some parent is, and I heard it from a teacher where she would say, hear ye, and the kids would respond back, all hail the queen.
That's funny.
I do use one of the new ones that I've introduced, because you do kind of have to change them up occasionally, is I say, and a hush fell over the crowd. And then the kids all say,
Okay.
hush.
That's good.
And so, but teaching them things like that, that way you can draw them back in and get their attention.
The
Yeah.
clapping is still my favorite.
Yes.
Oh yeah. I've used the clapping all the time.
It's just the fact, and most kids know it, especially if you're working with the older kids. And so it tends to get their attention almost immediately when you start a clapping rhythm. Yeah.
Yeah. My son's teacher last year, she had them sing a song and she would yell, chicken wing, chicken wing. And then they would all respond. It was like something macaroni. And they would all like, they had a little dance that went with it. But all she had to do was go chicken wing, and then something macaroni hanging with my homie. And then they were, whatever they were doing, they stopped, and that it worked. And so that worked for that teacher. And so he still sings that song. He hadn't been in that class in a year. And he still sings that song.
Yeah.
So,
That's awesome.
Those are those little things that can, get in our minds, but it gets in their minds and it helps them to remember, and they have fun with it too. We want to make the environment fun. We don't want to be doing, okay, these are the rules. We want to show them that we care and that we love them. And so the more fun we can make it, that's going to help you even that much more. And so
fun is the kids' work. So if it's not fun, they're not going to do it. And so you want to, as many jokes as you can crack and make fun of it, the better off it's going to work.
Well, David, thank you so very much for taking time with us today. I think it's an important conversation to have. And we do have some other episodes on classroom management. And David, we're also going to put some links in the show notes to some of your blog posts and discussions that you've had about classroom management as well. But before we go, would you like to tell everyone where could they find you on social media? How can they get in touch with you if they've got questions, that kind of thing?
Yeah, thank you so much. So the best way to get there is go to davidreneau.org. I have a unique spelling of Reneau. It's Reneau. And you can find me on all the socials. Most of the places I'm David Reneau. Some places I'm David E. My father beat me to the social media places. So there's only 6 David Reneaus in the country. And so we're just all fighting for those David Reneau handles. So that's why I don't have davidreneau.com, because some doctor in Michigan beat me to it. So davidreneau.org. That's my website. You can find me on all the socials there. That's where I write my blog. I do a new blog post every week, and I write about children's ministry, and I write about ministry in general. And so just all those things. So I'd love to chat and talk with you and see what I can do to help you out.
All right. That's great. Well, friends, as always, we appreciate you taking time with us today and spending time with us. We would ask that you would like and subscribe and all the things. And we look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye.